Alright, when we think of humans fighting against wild animals, perhaps we think we get stomped by basically everything out there. And a lot of that mindset may come from shows or people overhyping them. In fact, I think we tend to underestimate a human's capability to take down wild animals with our bare hands. After all, if we did get completely stomped by every animal out there, the human race wouldn't really survive, you know? But it's one thing for the average human to fight and lose to an animal, but what about the best our human lineage has to offer today in terms of strength? How would the world's strongest man fare against various animals in the animal kingdom like gorillas, jaguars, and so on? Well, if you want that answer, you've come to the right video, since today we're going to be analyzing which animals the world's strongest man on Earth can take down in a fight, and which ones he would absolutely get stomped by. And which human shall we choose? Well, how about the famous Brian Shaw? Now listen, I know a lot of y'all are gonna ask me, why aren't you gonna use Thor or Eddie Hall or some other strongman? Well, to be honest, it really wouldn't make too much of a difference. I chose Brian Shaw because he is simply a massive human and one of the largest strongmen to compete. He also held the world's strongest man title 4 times, and is just overall a beast of a dude. So, what are his stats looking like? Well, Brian Shaw stands about 6 foot 8 inches tall, and in his prime he actually weighed between 400 to 440 pounds. But let's just for this video call him 440 pounds just so we can use him at his peak. Okay, sounds good. But just how strong is Brian? Well, in his prime, he was able to deadlift just over 1,000 pounds, squat 900 pounds, and was able to bench press 530 pounds twice. So suffice to say, he is pretty much top notch when it comes to strength. And he's also really no stranger to fighting. Though he is not trained as a professional fighter, he has sparred with some UFC fighters, and with his sheer size alone, pretty much overpowered their movements. In fact, it was noted that Brian was so large that Dustin Poirier could barely hold on to him and secure a good position. Also, he's really no stranger to punching, wrestling, and muscling out of situations. After all, it doesn't really take a genius to throw a punch or tackle and grapple something, okay? And here's the thing, right? His sheer size and strength alone can basically almost compensate for some technical skills. But listen, we're not talking about human versus human fights here. We are pitting Brian against the animal kingdom. And well, Brian did say he wanted to know how he would do against a black bear.
And Brian was like, he told me the story. I go, so what are you saying? He goes, I just want to know how I do against the bear. And he was dead.
So I got you, Brian. I'll answer that for you and many other animals. So you gotta stick around to hear that. But before we begin, I would appreciate it if y'all subscribed and commented on this video. It would really mean a lot to me. And if we can grow this channel to 100,000 subscribers by June of 2025, I will do tug of war with a tiger or any other big cat for that matter. Sounds fun, so let's achieve that. But enough of the self-promo, let's see how the world's strongest man fares against the animal kingdom. Okay, so you see this wheel right here? I put some animals on here that I think would make for an interesting video if they were to go against Brian Shaw. So let's spin it. Ooh, okay. The silverback gorilla. Yeah, this is gonna be very interesting. The world's strongest man, Brian Shaw, versus a silverback gorilla. Yeah, many of you probably assume that the gorilla would just one-shot any human to exist, but that isn't the case one bit. And you know what? This fight is actually closer than you think. So first things first, how big is a silverback gorilla? Well, it really kind of depends which subspecies we're talking about. The western lowland gorillas, which are the gorillas you basically typically see in zoos, weigh about 310 pounds on average and stand about 5.5 feet tall. Now the eastern gorillas, such as the eastern lowland or the mountain gorillas, they weigh within about the 400 pound range, with some of the largest males able to achieve about 430 pounds. So surprisingly, this is one of the very few instances where the human, Brian Shaw, is actually larger than a silverback gorilla. Yeah, that's a massive human. Now I think what's on everybody's mind here, who is stronger, a silverback gorilla or Brian Shaw? Well, the answer actually might surprise you here, or it might not. Really depends on how you think of animals. You see, a gorilla's build is actually aimed at doing the motions of pulling rather than pushing. So perhaps its bench press might not be too impressive, but its pulling capabilities would be. Silverback gorillas have massive backs, massive shoulders, and very thick bones. This makes them nice and solidly built, okay? But here's the thing, I just don't really think a gorilla can achieve something like this. Now, as much as we'd like to know how much a gorilla could lift, there's really no concrete data on that. Yeah, all these supposed numbers are literally lied about or just straight up pulled out of nowhere with the equivalent aura of trust me bro vibes, you know? I'm not buying that a gorilla is 10 times stronger than a human, especially a professional strongman. But they are very powerful and would definitely ragdoll the average human. But Brian Shaw is not the average human here. And this is a fight, so maybe pushing or pulling strength is not as big as a factor as you may think, especially if you take into account that gorillas are more robustly built than Brian Shaw. Think about this, right? Brian is 6 foot 8 inches tall, okay? Now think about it like this. A gorilla is packing that 400-pound frame into a body that's only about 5.5 feet tall. So their bone structure is actually a lot more robust and their skull is a lot thicker, okay? So if Brian were to punch the gorilla perhaps, it's not knocking it out. I doubt even Mike Tyson could knock out a gorilla. But what is a gorilla gonna do to Brian Shaw? How do gorillas fight? Well, gorillas tend to kind of flail their arms aimlessly, right? I mean, surprise, surprise, they have no boxing experience, but gorillas are more or less grapplers. They like to grab and jump and leap and manipulate their opponents. They like to toss them around, okay? And once in range, they would like to bite. Now, the bite is not going to be very deadly per se. You know, it's not going to be like a lion's bite, for example. But it's gonna hurt. I mean, they do have sharp canines. So how would a gorilla fare against Brian Shaw in a fight? Yeah, you know what? How would they even fight? Well, Brian would maybe try hitting the gorilla, bashing it, but it's really not gonna do anything. And Brian's probably gonna know that sooner rather than later. So yeah, they're grappling here, okay? Now, I don't see the gorilla ragdolling Brian Shaw, and I don't really see Brian Shaw ragdolling the gorilla either. They're probably gonna push on each other, but I see the gorilla being a little bit more moving around dynamically. You know, gorillas tend to move around quadrupedally and are a lot more grounded than Brian Shaw, so it's gonna have more agility and be able to jump up and have more explosive movements than Brian Shaw. Now, I don't really see this being a quick fight, but I think the gorilla would bite Brian Shaw, maybe on the hand or the arm, and that would definitely hurt him and cause bleeding damage. And I think the gorilla would overall batter and beat up Brian, maybe not kill him, but I think the gorilla is definitely coming out the winner here, okay? Now, I don't see this going to the death, but the gorilla is gonna probably jump and leap at him, bite him, and just overall move around and batter Brian to the point where he's gonna fall to the ground. And at that point, it's pretty much game over for Brian. The gorilla is just gonna, for lack of better words, keep beating on him until it just gets bored. You know, it's not gonna kill him. It doesn't have the desire to, like, I don't know, like a tiger or something. But overall, I think the gorilla would win. All right, enough of that. Let's see the next animal coming. Come on, we gotta get a good one here, okay? Okay. Now this is gonna be controversial. Brian said he wanted to know how he would do against a black bear. Well, here we go. So we know how big Brian Shaw is, right? But how big is a black bear? They're not approaching a grizzly in size, okay? But it really depends which black bears we're talking about because yeah, their size is definitely very variable, but it really depends on the location. If we reference a black bear from Yellowstone National Park, for example, they weigh about 260 pounds. Yeah, Brian is almost double the weight of a black bear from Yellowstone, but they can get larger in certain regions of the US. You know, black bears in some parts of New York or southern Alaska are able to achieve 300 pounds on average. So yeah, Brian is still a lot larger than a black bear in this scenario. Now, if y'all are gonna be questioning about that 500-pound bear, that is one of the largest black bears ever recorded, and we're going to be referencing the averages here, right? So we're really looking at the average male black bear being between about 260 to 300 pounds. Here's the thing, Brian is 6 foot 8 inches tall, and black bears stand about eye to eye with the average human, okay? Maybe 6 feet tall on a good day, but that's kind of grasping for straws here. So as you can see, the black bear is going to be about maybe stomach/chest level with Brian, so it's going to have a hard time getting a good position, especially when trying to manipulate Brian and wrestle him. Yeah, that bear is smaller, so it's not going to have an easy time whatsoever. But the bear does have claws and a powerful bite. Now, the claws can definitely leave a lot of wounds. Don't get me wrong, but Brian here has very long arms and can literally just probably push away and toss around the black bear here. Where's the black bear gonna maul? Can't even reach Brian's head, right? Just gonna maul its leg or something? Yeah, I mean, if it does that, Brian will just, I don't know, do a hammer fist on its skull. Now, granted, Granted, black bears have thicker and more durable skulls than humans, but how many times can it get hit in the head by the world's strongest man? Have you seen the size of his fists, by the way? Yeah, I don't think it would be pleasant for the black bear, and while the black bear might be trying to wrestle at its leg, Brian can literally just keep on hammering at its head and push it to the ground. Or if the black bear does try to stand up, Brian could just charge in and push it and shove it around and maybe try crushing its skull. I don't know how that's gonna go. Voice your opinions in the comments about that, but overall, I think Brian would be able to subdue the black bear here, okay? I think his sheer size alone would be able to close that gap here. Yes, he's gonna get clawed up a bit and bitten, but it's not the end all be all. A lot of people survive getting mauled by black bears here, okay? Honestly, I think Brian Shaw is stronger than a black bear. I think Brian would be able to overpower the black bear in all of its movements. Brian has significantly longer arms than the black bear. He has human-like intelligence, so he's able to probably just see a lot more openings, such as, bashing the skull with his fists or just simply pushing and shoving the black bear away. But like I said, not going to be an easy fight for Brian here. He's going to get clawed up, he's going to get injured, but I think Brian could ground the black bear and basically chase it away or do something like that here. I don't know who would win in a 2-to-death situation, but I see the black bear basically getting manhandled for majority of the fight, okay? Honestly, a lot of y'all probably gonna hate me for saying that, but it's the truth here. He's one of the biggest and strongest men we have on Earth right now. 440 pounds and standing about 6'8" is nothing to be scoffed at. The black bear would simply just get overpowered here. Now, in a 2-to-death situation, I think the black bear might be able to squeak out a win. Wouldn't be easy though. Alright, enough of that. Let's move on, okay? Come on, we gotta get a good one, Brian has to take at least one dominant win here. Okay, well, the green anaconda. Yeah, I'm not gonna waste y'all's time and go too deep into this, but the green anaconda is basically one of the largest snakes out there. They average between 15 to 16 feet and weigh about 66 to 176 pounds. Now, of course, there are larger specimens. We're talking about the average ones here, okay? Now, these snakes are not venomous, and the main way they like to kill animals is by constriction. That involves wrapping their whole body around an animal and squeezing it tight. Now, here's the thing. The anaconda would be very, very hard-pressed to actually wrap around Brian Shaw and, basically constrict. It's gonna be fighting gravity here, okay? Brian is not like a typical animal. Usually, animals that anacondas like to eat are quadrupedal, and it makes their body pretty easy to latch onto. They're not fighting gravity. And a lot of the animals they fight don't have the capability to kind of push them off, unlike Brian. You see, Brian Shaw would basically be able to kind of just toss around the snake here. It's gonna be like one giant jump rope, okay? He's gonna grab the snake by the neck or something, and the snake might try to coil around his arm, but, he's gonna do what Thor never did and go for the head. He's gonna easily either just pin down the snake on the ground and stomp on its head, or something to that variant. Now, these snakes are very large, don't get me wrong, and a lot of y'all might be like, what about the weight, But he is the world's strongest man after all. He is throwing that snake to the ground and just aiming at its head. I don't really see how the snake could win here. I think Brian basically wins 9 out of 10 times, or something to that line, okay? Anyways, we're moving on here, and neither one of these options are gonna be easy. Which one? The wheel does not like Brian right now, man. The Alaskan moose. Yeah, this is a complete stomp in the moose's favor here. Yeah, moose are a lot larger than what people think. They're not some dainty little deer. Mature males achieve about 1,300 pounds by the fall time and stand about 6.5 to 7 feet tall. So yeah, a mature bull moose would basically be looking at Brian Shaw eye to eye. And what is Brian even gonna do to the moose? He's not gonna punch it. He really can't do anything here, man. I'm sorry. Have you seen how large and sharp the moose's antlers are? The moose is gonna definitely ram into Brian here, and it's gonna overpower him, okay? Moose are incredibly strong animals, and once he grounds Brian, if the antlers don't really impale him or batter him, the moose is just gonna kick and stomp on Brian. And also, yeah, you see how big the moose's neck is? Brian is not choking that thing out. Sorry, Brian. No human can win against a bull moose. In fact, grizzly bears are very, very hard pressed to actually fight a bull moose. Brian, if a grizzly struggles, you are too. I'm sorry. And finally, we're on to our last animal here, and it is the jaguar. A lot of y'all are gonna gas up the big cat, but it honestly is going to be a very, very close fight. But which jaguar should we choose? Well, I want to reference perhaps the largest jaguar just to make it even here, okay? And that is the Pantanal jaguar. Yeah, this beast of a cat is the the apex predator of its region. It would be a nightmare for Brian Shaw to deal with. Yeah, Pantanal jaguars are actually pretty large here. Mature males are said to average about 210 pounds. Yeah, that might be heavier than some of y'all watching this video, but that's only about maybe half the size of Brian Shaw. So the question is, can he take down the jaguar? Can he injure it? I don't think Brian could do it very easily. Jaguars have very sharp claws and have a very strong bite. In fact, what perhaps makes them unique compared to any other big cat is its ability to open up its jaws at a much wider angle. Now this enables their unique method of taking down prey, which is biting through the skull. Yeah, unlike cats in general, jaguars like to bite the skull of their opponents. Now that's not to say that jaguars can't go for the throat or any other body part, it's just that they're able to bite the skull, and when given the opportunity, they most certainly will. Now could it even reach Brian Shaw's head? That's kind of up for debate. Jaguars would definitely be lunging and leaping at Brian and maybe clawing at his back. And yes, the jaguar would create massive wounds and perhaps lacerate Brian's leg. But here's the thing, okay? Humans stand upright, and the jaguar would have a hard time getting a good position to grip onto Brian Shaw. You know, it's gonna be fighting gravity, and simply put, jaguars deal with quadrupedal creatures and not upright humans. Because of this, jaguars are used to leaping onto the back and having easy access to the head, and that wouldn't really be the case in this scenario. If a jaguar tried leaping onto Brian, well, Brian has massive arms, almost gorilla size to be honest with you, and is just scarily strong. He will definitely toss around the jaguar, and he is stronger than the jaguar. Yeah, you heard me right, folks. Brian Shaw is stronger than the jaguar here. But how would he eventually kill the jaguar? I don't really think he could that easily, okay? I mean, the best option, like I said, is just bashing the jaguar's skull in, which personally I don't really see happening. Maybe twisting the neck or stomping on its head if it pins it down, but then again, he has to actually pin it down, and I don't think Brian's going to be able to really do that easily, especially if the jaguar's going to be moving around. You see, the jaguar's gonna be leaping at Brian. It's gonna be clawing at him, and I think constantly over time, Brian would experience heavy blood loss and eventually get very fatigued, and that's when the jaguar might be able to kind of do a finishing blow to Brian. But not going to be easy, and maybe sometimes I might be able to see Brian winning with a lucky shot. Might be able to pin down the jaguar or hit its skull just in the right area, but that's kind of being hopeful here. This is almost a 50-50 in my opinion. I see it more leaning towards the jaguar. Okay, I see the jaguar winning via the end game. It's just going to constantly berate Brian and just cause him to lose a lot of blood here, but I see the jaguar in a life or death situation walking out victorious more often than not. Now, listen, before you click off, a lot of y'all are probably gonna ask what animals I think Brian could take down. Okay, Brian beats a chimpanzee, he beats a wolf, he beats a puma, and maybe a leopard. But I think he's stopping at jaguar. You know, he's definitely not taking on a lion or a tiger. But yeah, thank you all so much for watching. Feel free to check out the rest of my content and have a nice day.